in the crypto space. I know you're very interested in AI. I think there's some huge opportunities for people, not only to be able to create more income, to be able to increase the value of that they have to a business or as an employee, but also from an investing standpoint. So talk to me a little bit about how you've gone about deciding to be so diversified across all these different sectors, and what's the mindset? What's the thinking on that? Why do you do that?
Now, it sounds like a broad spectrum, but I'm going to clear that up. Is that real estate is outside, right? It's something I'm learning, so I don't really, talk about it much. It's something I'm really learning and trying to. I know that there's a good opportunity. I know that the risk is low, so I'm investing in real estate. But if you look at everything I talk about stocks and I talk about crypto and I talk about other investments. It's all tech based.
Yeah.
My background's in tech, right?
Yeah.
I was a software engineer for 15 years. So I rarely talk about or invest in stocks that are outside of tech.
Yeah.
So, and crypto is tech also, right? Yeah. So, and my background's in software, but also studied in grad school cryptology, which is what cryptocurrency is based on. So I kind of like, I'm kind of in a narrow investment, I guess, view. It looks diverse, but it's actually pretty narrow because it's always something to do with tech, AI, and all those things. It's always the base I have is my background in technology.
Yeah, there's such a big takeaway there because a lot of people would look and they'd say, hey, well, stocks and crypto and AI, like it seems diverse. It seems like a bunch of different things. But what you've identified as part of your way of thinking is, hey, what am I really good at? What do I really understand? What do I really understand? And how can I use that knowledge that I already have to go alongside those patterns to understand what's happening from a trend perspective? And how can that actually lead me into a place where I can make some decisions that other people aren't going to be able to make? So that's really big.
And that's what another point I want to make is that almost everybody has expertise in some industry, and they don't even know it. Nurses understand; they're on the ground, they're on the front lines. They understand if a new medicine comes out, will the doctors accept it? They understand things like that, right? And one of the biggest plays I made was in the pandemic. I understood that everybody was going to move to Zoom because I worked for corporations and I knew what was going to happen. And that was from my, being on the ground on the front lines. And like I said, even if you're a mechanic, you know what people are using, what they want. You can learn a little bit about stocks, learn a little bit more about investing, use that base knowledge that you have, and you have an advantage on everybody else. You just have to marry the two together.
And so when someone's sitting down and they want to get clear on what kind of opportunities they should be looking at, what are some of the questions you think they should ask themselves to get clear on what they're good at and what they know? The stock market and investments in general is very broad, right? And different things affect different stocks, different things affect different cryptos, different things affect real estate, right? So you got to kind of like I did, you focus on a narrow perspective on something that you do know, right? And you stick to that one thing and you're able to find success like that, right? If you try to be too broad, it's more difficult because you have to understand more angles and more data points to be able to make the right decisions. So I would always tell people to just stick in a certain industry, a certain sector, and focus on that until you learn it well. And then maybe you can go outside of that, but if you focus on one thing, all the stocks in this sector or industry are affected by the same things, the same macro events, the same economic events, the same laws being passed or whatever news being released or whatever it is. They all fall and rise together. So I would tell a new investor to find out what you're good at originally, and then find out a sector in the market that relates to that, and then start learning and start putting that knowledge that you already have to the test and see what you can make of it. Yeah, I think that's really good advice because sometimes it can be overwhelming. There's so many options when it comes to investing. There's so many options when it comes to starting a business. It's like, how can you triangulate between what you're really good at, what you know a lot about, and something that you care about, that you want to continue knowing a lot about it, and you try to hit that little bullseye right in the middle. So I think you've got an incredible story. Not only have you become a great teacher on the investing side, helping to teach and inspire people about
making those small investments today, regardless of where they're at, so they can get where they want to go. But I'd love to hear your story. I know you've started some businesses, you've worked in corporate jobs, you're investing in a variety of different things. How did you go from that place? What's the story of going from that place of being employed to creating and exiting a business and then eventually moving into a heavy focus on investing?
So it started back in 2005. I graduated Austin Peay State University in Tennessee with a degree in computer science, right? So I went to Puerto Rico for a while, played basketball. That didn't work out like I thought it would. I played pro basketball for like a year and a half, and I wasn't as good as I thought. So I didn't, I played, but it wasn't like I thought. So I came back and said, well, I'm going to get a job in software engineering. So I started working for this company called EdgeNet in Nashville, Tennessee. EdgeNet was a artificial intelligence company. Now, people hear that and say, what? Back then, artificial intelligence has been out for 50 years. Yeah. So it's not like it was nothing, it's grown to now we're seeing stuff like ChatGPT and stuff. But back then it was just facial recognition. What that company did is that you'd build a new house, it would put the windows and doors onto the CAD drawing or whatever. Now it sounds easy, but back then it was hard,
Yeah.
You needed AI to be able to do that. Now it's like, we do that all the time, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I worked there, and I worked there for about a year, right? This was 2007. I started working there. So 2008 came along, and there was the mortgage crash, right? So they started firing people and letting people go for whatever reason. So I ended up getting fired from there. There was a big layoff, and they would fire like 50 people for anything they did wrong, and I was part of that group. Yeah. So I remember one of the biggest things that hit me is that I was completely and utterly dedicated to that job. I decorated my cubicle. I was excited to be there. And when that happened, they gave me a box when they fired me. So I had to go in there and fill my box with all my stuff. It was a security guard behind me, right? And I felt so bad. I told myself, I will never give this much of my energy to a corporation. Now, I believe in doing your best, working hard, but I'm never, I'm not going to think like this anymore. So after that, I moved to Florida. And I got a job. I went to grad school, and that's where I studied cryptology. So that's really where I discovered Bitcoin. I started that in 2009. And then I went to school for 2 years. Bitcoin came out 2009 also. I heard about it in 2011. I started investing in a little bit. So I had like $500 and I bought some Bitcoin. It was hard to buy it back then. I used to have to meet a guy at the casino down here in Florida, and he'd be playing poker, and you'd have to wait for him to finish a hand, and you'd buy it from him. In between his hands, you give him cash, he would open up your phone, and that's how you would get it. There was no Coinbase. Coinbase didn't come for 2 years later. There was very few sites to it. So I took that 500, and I didn't really know what to do with it, right? So I'm online looking at these forums about Bitcoin and the future of it, and this guy messaging me, and I don't think that forum exists anymore. He said, hey man, if you send me that 500 in Bitcoin, I can double it. And I was in grad school. Remember, I was struggling, and I was like, well, maybe this is true. It sounds weird, but maybe. And I sent him the money. Of course, he stole it, never got it back. But it made me think, if somebody wants it this bad, it must be valuable. So then I started researching the technology. I started researching all this other stuff, how it works. And so I wouldn't get tricked again. So, some time went on. I got out of grad school. So I wanted to build a company, right? So I started a company called APAN Software. And we did custom software for people in the Tampa Bay area. The first 2 years, I did extremely well. The last year, because of a change in the SEO, Google's algorithm, I could no longer get leads anymore. So it hit me kind of hard. So we couldn't get any leads. I had 14 employees, ended up having to let everybody go. Went into a whole bunch of debt, $180,000 in debt, because I had a lot of pride, didn't want to give it up. Yeah. So I ended up having to give it up after I had that much debt. It was kind of piling up on me. So I tried to go bankrupt. The terms of the bankrupt was so strict. I didn't want to go through that. So I said, well, I got to pay this off. So I applied for a good job at Google, right? And I said, well, if I can't start my own company, maybe I could work for Google. That was my second dream. So I got through the first two interviews, and they didn't pick me from the third interview. So I studied for 6 months for that interview. They have study guides and stuff. Google is so hard to get into. And I was really depressed. Like I was like, oh man. So I got another call, AAA, you know, the auto company that, you know, roadside assistance. They also have insurance, travel. They have a bank. So it's actually a lot bigger than just car care. But so they called me up and say, hey man, we want to interview you. And I went to the interview and I really didn't want the job. So I was like slumped down in the chair, answering questions. Like, and the thing about it is that I got the job. So that job ended up paying me more than it was the highest paying software engineer job in Tampa Bay. Right. And it was actually a good company. Right. So, but I still had in the back of my mind, I'm not, even though that company was one of the best company I ever worked for, it was a great company. I still didn't want to depend too much on the company. So I never brought anything in my cubicle. I never, because I didn't want to go through the experience again. So at night, I remember I had that debt to pay off. So I was a teacher at a college at night. So for 2 years, 2.5 years, I would work all day to 5 o'clock. And at night, I'd be a teacher for 4 hours for, 5 days a week. I don't even remember, like I was working so much. I don't even remember my first 2 years of my daughter's life at all, So I paid off $180,000 in debt in 2.5 years. So then I was like, well, I want to start another company, right? So I started another crypto company called ICO Ranker. Remember, I didn't have any money, but I didn't have any debt either. So I'm in a decent position.
But you took the skills that you had on developing websites and understanding the algorithms to be able to build this site, which was something that was ahead of the trend. Because ICOs back then that's early days.
So like I said, as I learned about SEO in the company that failed, how to rank stuff on Google. I also learned, like you said, build websites, build stuff, how to add artificial intelligence in because of that company I worked for before. So all of those skills ended up at that point. So I got a business partner also because I didn't want to really handle everything. It was a guy I knew. He was used to be a stockbroker. So we both, it wasn't a lot of money. It took like $10,000 because I was doing all the work, right? So I built it in about 2 months. We put it out there. And then it started getting traction. And I'm like, oh man, this is kind of good. So, and then it made me, it inspired me to work harder on it. Then it just kept growing and growing and growing. At one point it had like 1.2 million hits a month, like ridiculous. Wow. We were getting like maybe 80 to 100,000 just on ads, a month, right? For the first 4 months, right? And then a company, the 5th month, a publicly traded company from Canada called us up and said, we want to buy that into technology. All right, well, how much you want to give me? And in my mind, I was thinking like 500,000 or something. And they were like, and my business partner said, nah, it's worth way more than that because of the potential, because of the revenue and stuff like that. And he asked for $3 million for it. And then they came back for 2.5. Then we negotiated. And then we got warrants and we got stock options and we got stock. So we got the 2.5 plus all this other stuff. It ended up being after we sold and everything like $4 million, $4.5 million. Because the stock went up after we made the deal because we were on a lockup period for 6 months. So that's when I became a millionaire.
What I'm curious is, what did that feel like to go from the place where you had that failure, negative 180, you had to let 14 people go, you had to go back to getting a job, something that you said you weren't going to put that much into again, and you knew in the back of your mind you were going to go do this. What did it feel like to have that exit and all of a sudden to be a millionaire?
Now I remember the day, it was like a surreal moment, like, because it was through a broker, right? So, the broker would take his cut and then he sent us both like 1.15 million. So I'm looking at my bank account and refreshing. And all of a sudden there's $1 million in there. It was like nothing in there right before that. And I'm like, this don't even seem real. Like it was so surreal. It didn't seem real. Right. And then later on, the warrant money came and whatever, and it was 2.5 million. It was a lot of money. Right. So I didn't get excited. I didn't jump up and down. It was like because after what I've been through, it was so surreal that I just didn't even get excited. It was like, I don't know this, I don't know how to explain that. So what I did do is that I was working at AAA at the time. And I remember it hit the news like, because it was at the time, it was a big cryptocurrency, acquisition at that time. I mean, now they are a lot bigger, 50 million, 100 million, but at the time it was a lot. So it was in the news and everything. So all my family knew about it and they're calling up, you're going to quit your job. And I was confused at that. Like, why would I quit?
Yeah.
I was making like $180,000 a year. I was like, well, in 5-6 years, I would run out of money anyway. So, So what I did is I kept working there almost for an additional year. So I took that, at the time it was roughly like $2 million, and I started investing it.
Thank you for listening to the Investor Mindset Podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Head over to theinvestormindset.com to join the Insider Club, where we share tools and strategies from the top investors and entrepreneurs on how to take it to the next level.